just in time for an intriguing story from a tidbit from Timothy P. Brown of Football Archaeology.com of was there a homicide on the Gridiron? Tim joins us in just a moment to tell us about murder on the football field.
This is the Pigskin Daily History Dispatch, a podcast that covers the anniversaries of American football events throughout history on a day-to-day basis. Your host, Darren Hayes, is podcasting from America's North Shore to bring you the memories of the Gridiron, one day at a time. So as we come out of the tunnel of the Sports History Network, let's take the field and go no huddle through the portal of positive gridiron history with PigskinDispatch.com.
This podcast is part of the Sports History Network, your headquarters for the yesteryear of your favorite sport. You can learn more at sportshistorynetwork.com.
Hello, my football friends. This is Darren Hayes of PigskinDispatch.com. Welcome once again to the Pig Pen, your portal to positive football history. And welcome to another Tuesday. We have Timothy P. Brown here from FootballArchaeology.com. Tim, welcome back to the Pig Pen.
Hey, Darren. Look forward to chatting. It's potentially a difficult topic that we're going to talk about, but I'll let that story develop as we go.
Yeah, this is really one that kind of surprising. Usually your titles and your articles are a little bit more on the lighter side. And, you know, your title from back in early October was Murder on the Football Field. A little bit of a mystery hangs over with that. And, like any good Agatha Christie or Alfred Hitchcock, I wanted to get into this article and read it. And I'm sure that a lot of the other readers of FootballArchaeology.com wanted to do that as well. So we are glad that you were here to tell us all about this instance in this article.
Yeah. So, one of the things I enjoy doing, is kind of set up to some of these, some of our discussions on your podcast is to just kind of talk about, well, how did I come across this issue or idea or information? And so this is one where, I'm always looking at old RPPC, so real photo postcards. And some of them I buy just, because they, guys are wearing some kind of old equipment or, the gear they have is just so horrible that it's just, kind of almost amazing that they decided to play. And other times, it's just a great photographically, or there's something appealing to it. And so in this case, I came across an RPPC. It showed three guys, the backfield for the Bethany College team in West Virginia from 1910. And what I thought was amusing about the picture was that they're standing on the field, and you can see the goalposts in the background. And not too far behind the goalposts, and not too far to the left, is a school building with a bunch of glass windows. So I just thought, okay, well, hopefully they had an accurate kicker, but if they didn't, then they broke some windows. So that's actually what got me actually interested in the image. But then a lot of times what I do is I knew it was identified as 1910 Bethany, so I did quick search on them, found out that in one of their games, an opposing player had died. And so then I said, okay, I'm going to bid on it. So I had a thing, and eventually, I get it. And so then that's when I really kind of dove into the research. I mean, it just did enough to know, okay, I could probably make a story out of this. So, I mean, what happened is that so Bethany College, small school in West Virginia, and they were playing for the second time. They were playing West Virginia University in football that year, and they'd lost it. I think tied a close game earlier in the year, and so this is like if there's a 10-game season, there's a 7th or 8th game of the season. And the game had been pretty chippy. And in fact, the Bethany coach had complained to the officials about, just kind of some of the behavior in the game. And so with a couple minutes left, Virginia's quarterback, a guy named Monk, kicks a field goal to seal the game. It's, make it 5-0. So, pretty much Bethany was going to be out of it. And then several plays later, Monk is still on the field. He gets by a Bethany player, falls to the ground, is carried off the field, and dies a couple hours later. So now, there's kind of the initial reports that came out. So, anytime a player died in a game, and especially in, this is a fairly big time game, it got publicized. So there were, if you looked at almost any small town newspaper in the country, it had a short article about this player who was killed in a football game. And so the initial articles said that the umpire had kicked the Bethany player, a guy named McCoy, that he had seen McCoy hit Monk from behind. And then, so he thought it was deliberate. And so then he kicked him out of the game for that. And then, basically right away, the local coroner, sets up a coroner's inquest that's going to be, scheduled for a couple of days later, and he orders Coy to appear. He wasn't arrested, but he was the next thing to being arrested. And the whole thing was, okay, the coroner was viewing this as a case of, he was investigating it as a murder. And so obviously that made it, the headlines all the more dramatic. And, pretty much right away, both schools cancel the rest of their football season. So then when it comes time to do the inquest, McCoy shows up. But by that time, the umpire is kind of walking back some of his earlier comments. So yes, he had kicked McCoy out of the game, but he was no longer saying, well, I saw him hit from behind. And then other people, nobody on either team said seen the hit, but there were people in the crowd who testified at this inquest that McCoy had hit Monk from in front, and it was basically a standard football play. So nothing unusual from that vantage point. Now, then what got revealed in this inquest is that Monk had a history of concussions and even, beyond anything that you can even think happened today. The previous year, he had, in a game, he had been hit and he went down unconscious. And the newspapers varied whether he was unconscious for 2 days or 2 weeks, but he was out of it for, a significant amount of time. And then, basically the doctor said, you cannot play football anymore. His parent told him, you cannot play football anymore. But he goes back to school for his senior year, goes out for the football team, and, because he's, this hard-nosed kid or whatever, the team makes him to be captain, So basically, once that testimony came out, that, the coroner is like, well, this is an accidental death, right? You can't, even if McCoy had done something dastardly, Monk was playing when he shouldn't have been. And, he had this history of, significant head injury, and yet he went out there and played again. So anyways, it's one of those where, there's some other little extenuating circumstances, but I think for me, I don't recall seeing other instances where, somebody was potentially charged with murder for activity on a football field. I'm sure there's other situations, not, I probably should do some sort of searching for that, but it kind of raises the question of what would it take today? So what would have to happen today for people to leave the field or folks in the stands and look at it and say, that guy ought to be charged with murder, in the event somebody was killed as a result of being hit or struck on a football field. So you know in my mind, I see certain. I'm not advocating necessarily for a murder charge, but I'm not advocating against it. But there are some of the targeting hits that I think are horribly foul. In terms of the way that some players are hitting one another. I've seen cases more at youth level actually than among older kids, where somebody grabs a face mask and is literally like spinning another guy around, twisting his neck, that kind of thing. What will, if that happened? And then you got, another case would be, sometimes you see these fights, and somebody's helmet comes off. But if somebody took their helmet and swung it, hit another guy who doesn't have his helmet on, if you hit him in the head,
sort of that Myles Garrett, Mason Rudolph from the Steelers-Browns game probably about 4 or 5 years ago. I think that was a famous case of that, with Myles Garrett swinging the helmet at an uncapped Mason Rudolph or whatever happened before that. But because they were talking about maybe pressing charges there, and it didn't even make contact, for assault.
Yeah. So I mean, you think about it, it's like, okay, how far does the fact that you're playing a football game absolve you from your behavior? Behavior that, I mean, if you played the game, one of the great things about it is you can go run into a guy, slam him, and take him to the ground, and it's all sanctioned. Everybody's happy that you did it, right? You can't
Right.
do that on the street, right? And you can't do it in your classroom. You get to do it on the football field. And yet, where does one cross the line? I just think it's an interesting question, and thankfully, it's not one that we have to face, at least, certainly very often. But the potential's out there. So it's kind of, I mean, it's not that you have to answer the question, but it's just to think about, okay, what would it take? What would it take for somebody you'd say, okay, that guy ought to be charged with murder for that?
Yeah, that's
Are you
true.
going to solve this mystery?
I don't know if I want to be the one that's going to have to be the judge and jury on that one. That's
Yeah.
I mean, I think there's, especially nowadays, we have video on everything from, little kids games. You have probably 3 or 4 parents filming it. Everything's filmed now, and gosh, you get to the NFL games, you got 45 cameras from every angle of the stadium looking at it, and 5 drones and whatever, so I think you can probably figure out what's going on pretty much on almost any football game, especially major college and professional, and probably a lot of the other ones too. So I think you may have more video evidence if a crime happened on a football field than you would maybe even at a bank.
Yeah. Good point. Good. Yeah, back then it was like, very few games, were filmed, and certainly not a Benny, West Virginia game.
Right.
Just wasn't going to happen. So yeah, it's yeah. I mean, just another of those other examples of where technology just changes the questions and the answers, and so
yeah, and I
crazy.
I think there's more of a camaraderie in football, maybe in the more modern eras, and there's a brotherhood, and everybody understands, that you're all on the same side, and somebody can get hurt bad if you do a cheap shot, because you see, teammates and opponents come together when somebody goes down. I think even more so probably than this era, where people just, they wanted to hurt you sometimes, and that was just the way the game was at that period of time.
Yeah.
And so I think it's a little bit more, it's calmed down a little bit, and people understand a little bit more that they can really do some damage to somebody.
Yeah, and I think obviously the protective gear and everything is much better. Obviously, all the concussion protocols we're in a lighter space, but also have bigger, faster, stronger athletes. So it's That's the hitting that goes on is really pretty incredible.
That's true. And people are still getting hurt, and sometimes even death is occurring. And that's a bad thing too. So hopefully we get some technology and rules and techniques and try to prevent people from getting permanently injured and, even worse, so hopefully that's in the future for football. So, yeah, Tim, we really appreciate you bringing up this story. I mean, it brings up, you bring up a lot of questions. People are going to be thinking about this. I know I'll be thinking about this. And, something that happened, 110, 115 years ago. And, bringing some light to it and bringing some memory of this young man that passed away playing a game that he loved, even to the point where he knew he was in danger playing it and did it anyway, and to his own detriment. And, it all comes through just seeing a building with a bunch of windows and a goalpost by it, and real interesting. Yeah. So, you have some interesting things like this each and every day in your tidbits on footballarchaeology.com, and maybe you could share with the listeners how they too can participate in reading this and enjoying your work.
Yeah. So, the easiest, best, and my preferred way would be that somebody goes to the site. www.footballarchaeology.com, subscribe, and you'll get an email every night at 7:00 Eastern with that day's story. Alternatively, you can follow me on Twitter or on Threads or on the Substack app. Of course, you can always just bookmark the site and go there periodically, but so kind of, whatever works for you. The information's out there, so kind of have at it and consume it however you prefer to consume.
All right. Well, footballarchaeology.com is the website. We have the show notes, has the links to get to this particular tidbit. We have a link in there too that'll get you to the rest of Tim's site. And his name is Timothy P. Brown, and we enjoy him each and every Tuesday here on Pigskin Dispatch. And Tim, we thank you once again for shedding some light and enlightenment on football of antiquity.
Very good. Thank you, sir. And we will see you next week.
That's all the football history we have today, folks. Join us back tomorrow for more of your football history. We invite you to check out our website, pigskindispatch.com, not only to see the daily football history, but to experience positive football with our many articles on the good people of the game, as well as our own football comic strip, Cleat Marks Comics. Pigskindispatch.com is also on social media outlets, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and don't forget the Pigskin Dispatch YouTube channel to get all of your positive football news and history. Special thanks to the talents of Mike and Gene Monroe, as well as Jason Neff for letting us use their music during our podcast.
This podcast is part of the Sports History Network, your headquarters for the yesteryear of your favorite sport. You can learn more at sportshistorynetwork.com.